Good morning. Good morning. Try one more time. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the worship service for the First Unitarian Church of Hobart, where we affirm each week that love is a doctrine of this church, the quest for truth is its sacrament, service is its prayer, and this is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Since not everyone can attend in person, we are streaming the worship service online, and we extend a special welcome to all who are joining us virtually. The joys and sorrows portion of our service, however, is private, and we will temporarily pause the stream for that. Other than that, this worship service is being recorded and will be available for future viewing on our website. We invite you now to enter sacred time, to make this time and this place sacred by our presence and intention. Please turn off or silence your devices, and as you do so, I invite you also to turn down the volume on distractions, whether they are fear or anxiety, or the armor that you use to protect yourself from the world. You can do it as slowly as you need to. Breathe. Try to let go of any expectations, to drop any guilt or shame, to trust in the possibility of forgiveness. Try to let go of those other things and be here in this moment so that you can start to walk the maze within your heart, guide your steps into its questioning curves. This labyrinth is a puzzle leading you deeper into your own truths. Listen. In the twists and the turns, listen. In the openness within all searching, listen. A wisdom within you calls to a wisdom beyond you, and in that dialogue lies peace. As honorary Unitarian Albert Schweitzer noted, at times our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lighted this flame within us. In the spirit of rekindling one another's sparks, please join together in lighting our chalice by reading together the words on the screen or in your order of service. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together.
Indeed. Indeed, indeed. I invite you to open your gray hymnals to reading 627 for a responsive reading. I will read the regular text, and I invite you to join me in reading the italicized text. It's the same one we've been doing the past few weeks for this series. This will be our last time since this is the last week of this series. It's by Max Coots. We need a celebration that speaks the spring-inspired word about life and death, about us as we live and die, through all the cycling seasons, days, and years. We need the sense of deity to crack our own hard, brown December husks and push life out of inner tombs and outer pain. Unless we move the seasons of the self, and spring can come for us, the winter will go on, and Easter will remain a myth, and life will never come again, despite the fact of spring. So sometimes in life we're prompted to sing a new song together, so we're going to practice doing that now, both embracing whatever discomfort might be in there for you, but also bravely singing out so that we can hear your voice. I invite you to rise in body or spirit and join in singing hymn 298, Wake Now My Senses. Please be seated. So we have an opportunity when we gather in person to share what's been going on for us, what is living in our hearts and our souls, in our bellies and our minds, with this eye towards binding us together, to reaching out from our own solitary individualness that we're so used to, that feels so familiar in our society, and weaving something bigger with one another. And so I'm going to come around the room in a moment with the mic, and I would welcome a joy or a sorrow from you, and I would just ask that you share your name with us so that we know who you are. Does anybody have a joy or a sorrow to share this morning? To worship is to pay utmost attention to that which is most worth paying attention to. So when we gather each Sunday morning, we strive to bring that level of care and attention to our being together. But our ability to do that well rests on our Unitarian Universalist covenants, the faithful promises that we make to each other and to which we agree to be held accountable. We're not about being perfect, we're about showing up with our best efforts and learning together. Our covenants are inherently forgiving. And even when they are broken, even then we still seek restoration and renewal. Stumbling is wholeheartedly welcomed. So in that spirit, may we lean into the productive discomfort that makes possible all learning, all growth, all community. I invite you to rise in body or spirit to join in our recovenanting as we review 3 lines from our behavioral covenant. I invite you to respond to each with, may we forgive ourselves and each other and begin again in love. For all the ways that we have neglected to expand our spiritual growth and faith in action, may we forgive ourselves and each other and begin again in love. For all the ways that we have not committed our hearts and minds to building a community of caring, acceptance, and reconciliation, may we forgive ourselves and each other and begin again in love. For all the ways that we have not actively worked to build trust and respect in our community, may we forgive ourselves and each other and begin again in love. I invite you to join now in singing our doxology, the words of which are in your order of service and on our screen. Please be seated.
An image from Desert Storm lingers for me. From the early 1990s, shortly after the bombing of Iraq ceased, the Islamic Center here in Los Angeles circulated an amateur videotape obtained through a contact in Jordan that surveyed the civilian devastation. Soundless, the tape moved jerkily from close-ups of people who'd been injured or killed to unsteady panning of ruined mosques, schools, and homes. It confirmed what we had feared. As usual, the truth was difficult to look at. But I was particularly moved by one brief silent moment in which an elderly Iraqi woman appeared, swathed in black, standing alone atop a small mountain of concrete rubble. Alternately, she would bend down, pick up a piece of debris, and heave it aimlessly away, as if she knew her salvage efforts were futile, but would not be deterred from this rite of grieving, this terrible labor of love. Then she would bend her head back and raise her arms toward the heavens in noiseless wailing, as if asking, "Do you not care if we perish?" The attention of popular culture has long since moved on to other spectacles, but this anguished Madonna has hung like an icon in the bare walls of my conscience, staring at me with her wordless lament. I see her as the angel of history, sorting half-heartedly through the ruins of progress, trying to awaken the dead, weeping and petitioning heaven, sifting through the debris in their hope that a human cry might yet be heard from underneath the wreckage of our global economy. Jesus, too, knows something about this lonely vigil. The author of the book of Mark writes Jesus' words as, "Are you asleep? Were you not strong enough to stay awake? Watch and pray that you do not go the way of temptation." Of all the queries posed by Jesus, the interlocutor, to his disciples, this is the most unsettling. Peter, having just vowed he will never take refuge in denial, is invited to keep vigil with Jesus alongside the angel of history. His task is to resist the status quo coma through memory and practice. But this is such a difficult vigil to keep. The desire of our spirits so rarely seems a match for the fragility of our flesh. Indeed, Mark's portrait in Gethsemane makes clear that Jesus himself is no aloof demigod, serenely reflecting on the mystery of human pathos. Quite the contrary, he is profoundly distressed that it has all come to this. Jesus does not want to face the music, praying that the hour might pass. He hopes desperately that there is some other way to change the world, but he remains awake while the disciples fall asleep, no doubt dreaming of better times, so that when the powers come, all the disciples can think to do is fight or flee, both of which merely strengthen the hand of the authorities. So Jesus advises instead, "What I say to you, I say to all, stay awake." History is long and hard and lonely. As the very last of Jesus' parables articulates empathetically, this church can be a house for all peoples, but it is not easy trying to maintain it against the storms of day-to-day life. We don't have answers for all the world's questions, and all we have been told to is to keep vigil at the door with the angel of history, to stay awake.
Our staying awake is made a little bit more doable by our not being alone on the journey. We are with other folks. We have the possibility of receiving, of giving, of joining in our task. And so I invite you to just look around the room and see some of these folks that you're on this journey with, maybe smiling, maybe waving a little bit to greet these other people on this ship together. These folks that we have the possibility of supporting or being supported by, or asking questions of, or being queried by. There's this theme of jokes that have been told about Unitarian Universalists involving question marks, of burning question marks in lawns, of what the hell do they believe anyway. There's these beautiful opportunities that are presented when we show up in all our fullness and encounter other human beings in their fullness, and we feel inspired or frustrated or confused or delighted or perplexed in that meeting of different humanities. So much can be born into the world. But there's also the risks of us conspiring together, of letting each other stay asleep, of letting each other stay the same, of making some silent agreement with each other that we will continue on as we have always continued on. Any of us humans, Unitarian Universalist or otherwise, can choose the path of uncomfortable challenge and growth, or the path of uncomfortable sameness. In this series, we're looking at those different possibilities and aiming to choose that first path, the one of choosing the discomfort of challenge and growth. In the first week of our series, Cindy offered a wonderful example of being willing to do something uncomfortable, public speaking, for the benefit of the greater good. Both in her stepping up to share her story with us during our worship service a few weeks ago, and also her vivid description of how in the past she faced and handled the challenging questions and opportunities put to her by others. A student pointedly asking her how she would keep them safe. A fellow congregant inquiring, what would our faith not be our faith without? An invitation to share her personal story at the State House. In each of those instances, Cindy walked that path of letting herself be challenged to grow, and sometimes even going so far as to doing the thing that she thought she couldn't do. And then in the second week of our series, Sandy offered us the challenge of possibility, having the moral imagination to see what needs to be done and take up that responsibility, to ask ourselves, what am I doing here? What are we doing here? To make a contract or covenant with the moral imagination and being willing to embrace even possibilities that might have others question your sanity. In the third week of the series, I dove into how what both Cindy and Sandy talked about connects to our Unitarian Universalist perspective of not getting stuck in old ways, of continually trying to uncover what is underneath the current way of doing things, of continually exploring what is closer to the core of value in all of this. What would align our lives more closely to our ideals and our commitments? I invited everyone to consider how each of us could support others in living more true to their ideals and commitments. And last week, we explored opening ourselves up to being questioned, to our sense of familiarity being destabilized, that sense of comfort that we feel when we know the people around us and we know what to expect. Recognizing that there's usually a hallmark of us being at the center of things. That sense of comfort, of knowing what to expect. And then also the possibility of opening ourselves to welcome in those that are not at the center. So this week we'll be concluding our series by talking a little bit about developing the habit of staying awake to it all. And so to start us on that journey, I've got a question for us to think about for a couple of moments and then to chat about with just ever so briefly. When we have insights, when we realize new things about our lives, when we achieve a new perspective that opens things up for us in some way, it can be so hard to hold on to. Because our minds, our hearts, our souls have years of experience of working in other patterns, the new perspective can be hard to sink into and actually take root, to actually stick. So my question that I pose to you, just to think about initially for a little while silently to yourself, what's an example from your own life of you facing that challenge, of really adopting a genuinely new perspective for the long haul? And what made that possible? So in brief, what's an example from your life of really taking on a perspective that was new to you and keeping it for the long haul? So just to think about that for a moment while Jeremy plays some music for us, and then after he's done, we'll talk about it with each other briefly. So having given it some thought for just a couple of minutes, I'm going to now invite you, let me move away from this other microphone, which might make it a little better for the audio. I'm going to invite you to chat with just one person sitting near you, maybe two at the most, but we'll only have a couple minutes. to chat a little bit about this question and what came up for you, which is totally fine because it's not about socializing, it's about a spiritual practice of being with one another. And so this, whatever came up for you in contemplating it, maybe it's like something, I don't know how to respond, or maybe it's, well, I'm not sure what my answer is, but here's some questions that came up for me. Just for the next 2 minutes, share with one person sitting next to you consideration.
Mic check.
Okay, thank you everybody for sharing with each other, for exploring your internal landscape, for considering your own history, your own experiences, and what you might have learned from that, what you might have picked up from other folks, what they might have said, what might have piqued your curiosity or your thoughtfulness. So I'll just open up the space for one or two folks to share what came up for you in that experience. What did you hear?
Well, hi, my name's Cindy, and another story that was cut for time from a couple of weeks ago, so I had time to think about this, was I lived as an exchange student the year after high school in Germany. And so I lived with a family, I learned to speak German, but just being in the culture, I realized by the end of that time, I could no longer ever for the rest of my life only see things from an American perspective. My worldview had changed, I had become more of a world citizen, and then because I had done that, it was easier on a one-to-one level, see something from someone else's perspective. Someone might have had a thought or a reason that was different than mine, and I had not been thinking that way before I lived in Germany. So that was a big catalyst for change, and then practicing changing over 50 years, it kind of stuck.
Beautiful. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you. Other folks, something you heard come out of your own mouth or somebody else's?
For me, and we were talking about it, for probably many of us in this room, was even coming into this building. Just heart-stopping. For me, I lived in Chicago, I worked in Chicago, bartended, partied all night long. That's what Deb was praying. But, and I would actually go to the church I wanted to go to, and I'd sit in the parking lot and wait because I was half asleep. And then when I started hearing car doors slam, I'd go into the church, and then 15 minutes after that, I'd turn around and I'd leave. Because you could feel it. You can feel, and it's not to do with which religion, because I tried them all. It's just a feeling when you got in that, ooh, that's the one, get the pitchforks out. You know, and coming here made all the difference in my world. Give me an opportunity to give, and knowing that who I'm giving to, someone did the vetting, and I'm actually giving it to the person and having them happy, period. Making a cup of coffee for you, can't tell you how exciting that is for me. Yeah, but it's just that simple. Even just coming to this room, into this building, changed my world. And you can ask everyone, all my people, all my friends, my family, everyone, saying, what? You're going to church? Oh, yeah, right. You're not a kid anymore. You don't have to lie. Mommy won't spank you.
Good. Thank you, Rosalind. One more person. Yeah.
This question was incredibly challenging to me because I realized that I don't change my perspective a lot, and I don't let different points of view change the way I am. And I had to go back all the way to adolescence for such an experience, which was I had a very scientific, mechanistic, reductionist view of the world. And at the same time, I had learned transcendental meditation. It wasn't that my point of view changed or my perspective changed from a conscious decision, but more like things started opening up a little more and not seeming quite so determined and quite so rational all the time.
Thank you, Duncan, for that. Yeah, sometimes seeing the ways that we don't do that can be really valuable. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody, for sharing your thoughts, your considerations, enriching the space with your own wisdom. I invite you to rise and body your spirit now and join in singing hymn 396, I Know This Rose Will Open.
So the title of this series has been Sing a New Song, and we've been singing this hymn with a desk hand based on a fragment of a U2 song. I will sing a new song. And this time, for something different, I'd like to start out with that desk hand. And then we'll go into the hymn.
Please be seated. So I may have talked in a previous sermon at some point about a big change that I experienced when I was in elementary school when they decided that they were going to do some construction on the building to be able to fit more students in there. The building as it was built in the early 20th century, and there was a feeling of coziness to it, and they realized that the coziness wasn't really allowing in as many children as they should have in the building, so they're going to add an addition onto the building. And they were going to build this addition, or there were actually a couple of additions, one on one part of the building, one on another part of the building, but one of the ones was going to involve them tearing down this huge tree that just was a gorgeous tree in the middle of a grassy area that provided so much shade in the summertime and in those warmer autumn and spring days. And I remember my own fears or hesitations around change. I was in 3rd or 4th grade at the time, and I thought that it was just this lovely place, and the idea of changing it all just seemed kind of ridiculous. Why don't we just send those kids somewhere else and just keep this the same? My sense of aesthetics were challenged. I didn't want this shifted landscape. I wanted that openness that I was familiar with, a sense of relaxation, of being in this simple space together. I remember after the tree was cut down, before they had pulled up the roots, I specifically went out to count the rings on the tree to see how old it was. And I can't say that I remember at this point how old the tree was, but I want to say it was something like 150 years old or something along those lines. Eventually I came to accept that the tree was gone, that this new addition was there with the strange little rubber patterns that they'd put on the steps of all the floors and the stairwells. But I never asked myself about the impact of this shift to the other beings there. The birds that might have found a home in that tree, or the squirrels there, or the insects that were used to making their way in that part of the property, or the mycelium that the tree was connected to that undergirded the whole area, or the other trees in the area that might have been communicating with that one tree through that mycelium and blowing in the same breezes, or the earthworms that were tilling the soil under our feet. We all get so used to thinking in terms of the familiar, the people that we like or don't like, the jobs or hobbies that we take up, the things that we read about or see on the news. We people, we humans, are good at seeking, and we're pretty good at finding, but all that seeking and finding is directed by our own attention, and it's limited by what we can imagine, what we think we know. In some settings, other people are invited to bring in something new to the equation. And in school, teachers are expected to open up new ways of thinking. In a faith community, the minister or rabbi or imam is supposed to encourage our deepening spiritual maturity. In a job, our boss might encourage us to grow in particular ways. But even when nudged or encouraged or challenged to grow or evolve or deepen, there's the natural human tendency to think in familiar patterns, to still not quite be able to see things that we didn't see before. This past week, I gathered with some Unitarian Universalist ministers to discuss the future of Unitarian Universalist ministry, particularly thinking about post-pandemic life. Even though the pandemic is in some ways continuing on, we are gathered in different ways. There have been shifts in Unitarian Universalist ministry. There's far fewer ministers in Unitarian Universalism these days. There was a wave of retirements with the pandemic, and there have been many fewer ministers going into Unitarian Universalist ministry. And so it brings rise to these questions of how is it that we are familiar with doing church, and how do we need to do church in the future? And we gathered for this discussion at Pokagon State Park. And for any of you who've been there before, you might know there's a place to sleep in Pokagon State Park called the Potawatomi Inn. And my first day there, something clicked into place. Just the week before, I had picked up this book that had been sitting on my shelf for the past year. I hadn't gotten around to reading it yet, but I recently finally just put it in my bag. I just read this at some point. And I started reading the essays that it contained. It's this book called Mossback by David Pritchett, and it's subtitled Ecology, Emancipation, and Foraging for Hope in Painful Places. And I bought it because I was at a conference and I'd met the author once before and generally had a favorable impression of him and figured the book might have some good stuff in it. And so earlier last week, when I finally, after a year, picked it up and started looking at the words that are printed on the page, there was this one essay that I came across that started, "The summer of 2012 was hot in the Midwest. By the fourth week of temperatures above 90 degrees Fahrenheit and more than 2 months without rain, the grass was brown and many of our crops in northeastern Indiana were not faring much better." Now, since I was about to go to northeastern Indiana for this gathering of ministers, I took notice. And the night before the gathering started, I got to the part of that essay that talked about the Potawatomi Trail of Death, when in 1838, 859 members of the Potawatomi Nation were forcibly removed from Indiana to lands in what is now eastern Kansas. So at this state park, looking over the lake, driving the roads, surrounded by this gorgeous forest, walking this walkway, which is right next to the bird feeder where the 2 sandhill cranes would come up and nibble at the seeds that had been knocked out by the smaller birds there on the ground, walking just a few feet from them because of the glass of the walkway, and delighting in it, I thought of the people who used to call that place home, who were driven off so that others could replace their way of life with their own. And I also looked up Pokagon, which, as somebody who's not native to this area, I hadn't heard it before, I wasn't sure what it meant. And I learned that it came from the name of the Potawatomi chief Leopold Pokagon, whose strategy to save his people was to convert to Catholicism, to prove to the white people that his band could play along and earn their right to stay on these lands. And he was successful. They were given a special exemption from needing to go west. Pokagon's strategy meant that his band was saved from the fate of so many other Potawatomi, like those who were forced to take part in what would later be called the Potawatomi Trail of Death. And so in the essay, Pritchett talks about that experience as an apocalypse. The word apocalypse literally means unveiling. It comes from the word for lifting a bride's veil at a wedding and seeing what's underneath. And to read that essay, right when settling in to commune with my colleagues, unveiled some of the history of this place in which we were gathering, of what historical forces made it possible for us to gather as we did, of who was no longer around to be a part of our communing. One uniquely powerful aspect of being involved in a local faith community that you can't get from an online community is being faced with the new, being faced with the unfamiliar. I used to work in a record store in my late teens, and often people would come in and they would say, I'm looking for something that kind of sounds like this. And my manager and I would sort of confer for a little bit and say, it sounds, maybe have you tried listening to Richie Havens? Or there's this group called Dead Can Dance, which has their own spin on world music that you might want to check out. And people would take away this CD and they would listen to it, and they might come in the next week saying, oh my God, this is so amazing. Thank you for turning me on to that. There was this one guy who would come in who was a huge fan of King Crimson, and we would compare notes on whatever our show from the mid-'70s he had recently discovered. And then when Pandora came along, which is still around, but for a while was this intrepid online music place where you would say, I want music that sounds like this, and the algorithm would tell you, oh, here's another song we'll play for you, and another one, and another one. It would kind of get it right, but it wasn't quite the same thing of having that personal connection, of somebody seeing your face and seeing how you light up and saying, I get a feeling that it might be kind of like this. There's so much that the algorithm can miss. The predetermined story, doesn't get interrupted. In his essay in that book, Pritchett goes on to write, "The story does not end with displacement and genocide. Rather, we need to tell new stories, not of domination, but of interspecies internationalism, of mutualism and mutual aid. Perhaps in the future, children of settlers will walk through Potawatomi-tended forest ecosystems and tell stories of the blighted days when the trees were gone and the soil was silent and the land was dark without fireflies. Perhaps they will say that the Euro-American folk hero Paul Bunyan finally laid down his axe and helped the legendary Potawatomi hero Nanabojo nurture the woods of the Great Lakes back to life, so that the beaver and the otter and the deer nations had a homeland again. But that day is far off, and there is much work to be done in the meantime. That work starts with restoring relationships with land and peoples and telling new and different stories." Last week, I left you with the question, who do you invite to deepen you? Who do you invite to deepen you? To question you about your own alignments, your loyalties. But there's a problem with that question. When we ask who, the people that we most readily think of are the people that we most readily think of. The people who are already in our awareness, the people who are already occupy our thoughts. So I'll ask you this instead. In this broader community of which we are a part, outside of these walls, who is not already in your awareness? Who is not already in your awareness? In this series, I've talked about how one of the core aspects of Unitarian Universalism as a religion is not getting stuck. But I want to emphasize that while that's a good thing in general, it's especially important in this time, in this age, in this eon, because the internet age in which we find ourselves is about getting stuck. Having the algorithms feeding back to you more of what you already pay attention to. Oh, you've been listening to a lot of the Beatles? Well, here's some more Beatles. More bands that sound like the Beatles. Oh, you've been watching a lot of screwball comedies from the 1940s. Well, here are some more screwball comedies from the 1940s. And here are more comedies that are sort of similar to that. We are continually directed to more and more of the same. One of the things that people like us who watch or read a lot of the news can start to get distracted by is a particular way of thinking about politics, of thinking in terms of Democrats and Republicans, of Trump and Biden. And politics is definitely important. As somebody who used to do organizing and politics for a living, I definitely believe it's important. But I'll ask you this. In the 2020 presidential election, what percentage of the people voted for Trump? Anybody? Yeah, well, 25%. How about who voted for Biden? What was that? 25%, yes, exactly. So out of the entire population, 22.4% of the folks voted for Trump, 24.5% of the folks voted for Biden. So altogether, that's 46.9% of the people in the country. In Northwest Indiana alone, when we just think in terms of elections, of Republicans or Democrats, there are hundreds of thousands of people that escape our awareness. To say nothing of the millions of non-human beings who share with us this little corner of the interdependent web of existence that you sometimes talk about. The people that are talked about on the news are usually the ones who are already closer to the center of things, staking out some kind of powerful claim. And the internet has gotten centralized too, with just a few companies controlling the vast majority of what people see or hear or think. There's only so many things that are revealed to us. But even still, there are things that peek through between what's going on in Gaza or from the story this morning of what happened in Iraq, that video there, or what happened with Rodney King or George Floyd. There are some things that peek through, but by and large, everything gets centralized. So as Unitarian Universalists, as a people who are dedicated to not getting stuck, here in Northwest Indiana, how do we continue to expose ourselves to being questioned, to being tuned by one another, being tuned by the people that we might not notice, to the chords of a new song that we don't yet know how to sing? For a new song to be sung or a new story to be told, we need to anchor ourselves in something different, to rediscover the authenticity of our relationships with one another and our new relationships with those who have not yet found their way into our imaginations, the new songs that are ours to sing, the new stories that are ours to tell. The danger of falling into a rut of just asking familiar questions, of just talking to familiar people, of having familiar conversations applies to everyone, but it especially applies to ministers. As the guy up here is supposed to be inviting you all to deepening into new perspectives and new avenues of spiritual growth, it's particularly important that I actually be doing that with my own life. And so I'm very grateful that this past fall the board approved my taking a month of sabbatical leave to do just that, to focus on opening my own self up to deepening into new perspectives, to engaging in ministry in fresh and new ways with all of you. It's an investment in both myself, from both myself and the board in our future ministry together, that it may unfold in profoundly life-giving ways that none of us might yet be able to imagine. And so while I'm away over this coming month, I'll still be here for another week, but while I'm away over this coming month, sensing for what new songs and stories feel most vital for us at this time, I hope that you will join me in opening yourself to being questioned, to asking the questions that bring new perspectives, that include more folks. My dad was an artist, and there's a picture that I have that he made when he was in high school that hangs on my wall when he was first learning how to draw in perspective, where he'd have one point on one side of the picture and one on the other, and the lines of the building come into an approximation of a 3D perspective. Each one of those points create more dimensionality and more possibility in what we're able to perceive and what we're able to think, what we're able to sing or tell to each other. And so my question that I leave you with at the end of this series to contemplate, to discuss with one another, what perspectives in Northwest Indiana are not already in your awareness? And how might it shift things for you to be questioned by them? How might it shift things for you to be questioned by them? May we learn to walk the mazes within our hearts anew, letting our steps be guided into questioning curves, leading us deeper into our own truths, listening in the twists and the turns, listening in the openness within all searching, listening to the wisdom within us, calling to the wisdom beyond us. May our hard, brown December husks be cracked open, and may we let life arise from inner tombs and outer pain as we move the seasons of ourselves, allowing spring to come for us. May our senses be awoken to hear the earth call as we reach out for the new, taking as our neighbor, both stranger and friend, joining with all people, mingling our calling with all who will share, rekindling one another's spark, and singing our new song together that brings hope and love, and that transforms us by the renewal of the mind that we discover in each other. And may that ever be so. Amen.
May we all shake off the status quo coma, tell new stories, and open our eyes to new perspectives, and to who is not already in our awareness. In this congregation, we gather our resources to direct them to build a nobler world than we know today. This month, we are sharing our Loose Change for Social Change offering with the Menstrual Health for Gaza initiative. Faith in Action is collecting loose change for social change for the month of March to specifically support Heart to Heart International's Menstrual Health for Gaza initiative, which is dedicated to distributing menstrual pads along with our hygiene kits to women and girls in Gaza. These kits are more than necessities. They empower recipients to reclaim their health, hygiene, and dignity under extraordinarily challenging conditions. Heart to Heart International is a long-established 501c3 global health humanitarian charity working in 60 countries and has a perfect 100% score from Charity Navigator. This LCFSC collection for March coincides with our community's ongoing physical collection through the end of March of menstrual products for local distribution, an effort being led by Patricia Riley-Chirilla. Please give generously in the tin cups to support the Menstrual Health for Gaza initiative, and please donate purchased products in the collection box in the parish hall to support the needs of economically challenged local women and girls. The money in the baskets goes to sustaining the mission of our congregation. The money in the cups goes to thank you, Menstrual Health for Gaza initiative. For those not with us in person today, there's an online link for both one-time and regular donations, and we have our 4 volunteers. Thank you so much. For your prayers, your presence, your service, and your gifts. We are truly grateful. Now it is time for announcements. I have nothing. However, I know we have some live announcements for Michelle.
Hello. 4th of July is coming up faster than it seems like. So the parade goes right past the church. We've had entries in the parade in the past. So should we do that again this year? Should we do something else? Should we just hang out and not do anything? If you'd like to participate in a little discussion about that, let me know and we can arrange like a Zoom meeting to talk about it. IU Northwest and Northwest Indiana Jewish Federation Community Relations Committee are hosting a viewing and discussion of the film Repairing the World, which explores the healing of the community of Pittsburgh after the shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue on April 7th at 2 p.m. Let me know if you're interested and if anybody wants to carpool. Faith in Action invites all ages to join with Brown Faces, Green Spaces on Saturday, April 13th at 10 o'clock for a cleanup of Marquette Beach. Let me or Caitlin know if you're interested or if you'd like to carpool. Faith in Action will show the Ava DuVernay movie Origin about the story of Isabel Wilkerson, the first Black woman to win the Pulitzer Prize for journalism, as she searches for the links between slavery in America and Jim Crow, the Holocaust, and India's caste system. The showing will be April 12th here at church. Doors will open at 5:30 for snacks, and movie will be at 6 o'clock with discussion to follow. And last, Pastor Leah's United Methodist Church here in Hobart is sponsoring a Pride Fest for the first weekend in June. They are looking for performers for the festival, so if you or anyone you know might be interested, let me or Pete or Cindy know, and we can put you in touch with Pastor Leah. Or if you'd just like to help her plan the event, let us know. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Another announcement? Get up here.
Sorry. I know it's very irregular since I know. March 30th, there is going to be a bus leaving from the Highland Mosque at 10 a.m. going to South Bend to protest in front of AM General, which is the corporation that makes Humvees for war. And so a group of folks called the Northwest Indiana Palestinian Action Committee, which has just recently formed, has tickets available for this bus ride to South Bend on March 30th, leaving at 10 a.m. to protest the profits that are being made off of the war in Gaza. So if you have any questions, later that afternoon, 4 o'clock. If you have any questions, ask me. Thank you.
So these were some other opportunities to learn and grow together. Thank you, Carl and Michelle. Now please rise in body or spirit to join in singing our closing hymn 346, Come Sing a Song with Me. Do not be conformed to this eon, but instead be transformed by the renewal of the mind, that you may ascertain what is good and acceptable and wholesome. After the postlude, we will extinguish this flame, but we will continue to carry in our hearts the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment until we are together again.
Please join us for fellowship in the fellowship hall.